Welcome back to the Neutral Zone. Today we're going to be covering Penn State and their outlook for the 2024 season. Obviously, the Big Ten looks entirely new compared to the last decade or so. I'm so excited to see kind of what Penn State does. I've been on record saying James Franklin is one of my favorite coaches in college football. I think he's very underappreciated. And I think this year it's a big year for him. We're going to talk about their schedule. We're going to talk about their depth chart, their roster. Kind of just our prediction for how their season is going to go. Normally we do like a real game by game prediction, but today's just going to be like an open conversation about them. So Penn State fans, if you haven't already, please like, comment, subscribe to the notification bell. Or if you're just college football fans in general, make sure you like, comment, hit that notification bell, subscribe. Football season starts in 9 days, so we're looking forward to that. But Dad, let's get right into it just to kind of pull up their schedule. Obviously, they don't play Michigan this year. They don't play Oregon, and I think that plays, huge for them. They host Ohio State. I don't think Penn State's getting talked about enough. I think this team – I have Ohio State, Oregon in the Big Ten title game, but I think this team could get to the Big Ten title game, especially if they can somehow beat Ohio State. And even if they don't beat Ohio State, I mean, if you go 11-1 and your loss is to Ohio State, then Ohio State goes undefeated and beats a team like Oregon. Now you're in a tiebreaker situation with Oregon. I don't know how that shakes out, but I think a lot of stuff could kind of have a domino effect. I think with Penn State's schedule, it is very, very favorable for them. Their hardest game outside of the Ohio State game is USC, and we don't know what USC is going to be this year. So the fact that that's their second hardest, opponent, and they have so much question marks surrounding the Trojan program, I think Penn State is in a really good situation. What do you think about Penn State, though, as a Big Ten fan?
So looking at their offense, I really like this team. I think Drew Aller is a really good quarterback. You're talking about a guy that only threw 2 interceptions last year in his first starting tick. My only concern with him is Keandre Lambert-Smith was their leading receiver, and they lost him. They did bring over Julian Fleming from Ohio State. I think Julian was like the number 1 wide receiver and maybe even the number 1 recruit the year he came out. Just injuries and depth chart things. He was never able to see his full potential at Ohio State. If he can really pop, and when you talk about these 2 running backs that they bring back in Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, they're going to have a good defense. I consider them much like Clemson. They're going to be a team that always has a really solid defense. The question is, do they have the athletes on the outside to really make teams have to not stack the box? They're bringing back Harrison Wallace and Caden Sanders, but both of them were way down on their depth chart, way down on their number of catches. So Harrison Wallace only had 19 receptions last year. Sanders only had 6. So they're not bringing back much in productivity from their wide receiving group. That's my only concern with them. I think they're going to have a great line. I think they're going to have a great rushing attack. I think you may see Drew even take another step into being a superstar quarterback at the college level. It's just, does he have the weapons to really make this thing? And again, when you look at much of that schedule, there's not much to be concerned about. But you are talking about the USC. You are talking about the Ohio State. Again, assuming that whoever's in that Big Ten championship, if they're able to navigate that, Oregon or a Michigan or Ohio State again. The problem with Penn State for the last couple of years is they've done very good at winning the games they're supposed to. Their problem is the games where they're the underdog, they don't seem to be able to pull those ones out. They seem to perennially lose to Ohio State and Michigan. Year after year, they can't beat those 2. So I don't know if they get over that hump this year, but that's really the last thing that they need to do. They need to be able to beat the top 10 teams when it matters.
So I actually want to bring something up. I know you said, when it comes to them being an underdog, it's where they that's their Achilles heel. I think they'll be an underdog in only one of these games of the 12. I don't think they'll be an underdog in the USC game or the Washington game. So do you think, let's say hypothetically this team goes 10-2, they lose to USC and Ohio State. I still think a 10-2 Penn State team gets them playoffs. I think I've said this numerous times about numerous different teams, and I sound like a broken record. I said it about Utah. I said it about, I think, Ole Miss. I would be very surprised if Penn State is not in the playoffs based on the schedule. I don't see them losing more than 2 games. I don't even see them losing 2 games, but more than 2 games on the schedule would be an eyebrow raiser to me. I think
Yeah.
I could see Ohio State and maybe a Wisconsin, or Ohio State and maybe a USC, but I don't see any other game on the schedule where I'm like I think Penn State will be a double-digit favorite in every one of these games outside of the USC, Wisconsin, Ohio State game. They'll probably be a 10-point favorite or more
Well,
in
well,
every other game.
and I think there's some things that we still got questions about. We got to see what Washington looks like right now. Obviously, they lost a lot, but maybe Washington and the depth was much better than we really attributed. Minnesota has an opportunity and normally is halfway decent. I'm not going to say great. And Maryland is normally pretty good. Again, I think you are very right. I think Penn State is going to be a favorite in 11 out of 12 games, but the question is what happens if, let's say, Penn State is 11-1 going into the postseason, and then they lose the Big Ten championship, and now they're 11-2, and the 2 real big games they've lost both of them. I don't know if they're going to win the tiebreaker now, and we don't know how much or what's really going to shake out in college football, but if it is one of those arguments, one of those head-to-head arguments, and you're talking about a 11-2 SEC team that has a couple of big wins, I think those teams are going to win out.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to hit on their depth chart one more time, though. People might not like this comparison, but I'm going to do it anyways because I see comparisons. I look at this team like the Michigan team last year. I don't think Michigan's wide receiving core was great. They had Roman Wilson. They had a couple of other, lower named guys. But, you bring back Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. That reminds me vastly of the Corum and Donovan Edwards tandem. I'm not saying they play the same. I'm just saying having 2 backs who are dynamic in their own right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Penn State's going to have one of the best offensive lines in the Big Ten. Drew Alar's, a rising junior, so he's going to have a little bit more experience. I don't think he's going to be asked to do a lot. I think Penn State's defense is the best it's been in a really long time. I think this is the best Penn State team that James Franklin has had in his tenure there as the Nittany Lions coach. So I don't think we're going to have a situation where Drew Alar is going to have to go out and win them a bunch of games, especially when we saw their schedule. Now, I don't think this team is a national championship team. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But I think this is a playoff team based on their schedule. Now, if they had to play an Oregon and a Michigan, I'd feel a little bit different. But the fact that their schedule is so favorable, I would be very surprised based on how the team is constructed defensively, as well as this 2 running back and the offensive line, that this team doesn't get in the playoffs. The floor would have to fall out from underneath them for them not to get in the playoffs this year.
Yeah. If I was a betting man and I had to put money one way or the other, I would say that they do get into the playoffs. And I got to give credit. I did not mention them earlier, but they are bringing back their number 1 tight end in Tyler Warren, who went for over 400 yards last year. So that is obviously a safety valve for Drew. So yeah, if you ask me right now to put money down on whether I think they're going to make the playoffs or not, I think they're going to finish in the top 12. Like I said, my only concern is if they do lose the Ohio State game, and then let's just say they're able to make it to the Big Ten championship game and they lose to Oregon or Ohio State, which at that point in time, just like many years past, they've lost the big games. They would have lost again. I think that Ohio State game means so much to this Penn State team this year, or getting a big win in that Big Ten championship, because I think that's the dragon they got to slay. They got to slay that. Hey, we can play with the big boys. Yep, we beat up on the and again we'll mention some of those teams, the Marylands and the Purdue's and the Indianas. Can they take the field and win against the big boys?
Yeah, I think that's yet to be seen. But like I said, I think this is the best Penn State team we've seen in a really long time. I think this is the best team that James Franklin has had, along with the easiest schedule that he's had. I mean, obviously, I don't know what kind of schedule he's had 7 years ago, but I'm saying in recent memory, not having to play Michigan and Ohio State both in 1 year. I think Michigan's going to be down this year. So I don't think if they had to play them, it would be the end of the world.
I think this is the year they'd want to play them.
Yeah, I would still favor Penn State over Michigan if they played, but the fact that you don't have to play them still helps.
And I'll also say that Ohio State game, that's probably going to be a whiteout. Beaver Stadium is going to be rocking. Again, I think Ohio State. I'm an Ohio State fan, obviously. I think Ohio State is a really good team, and I think they have more talent than Penn State. But if you were going to get them in a year, again, as you mentioned, great offensive line, great running game, which seems to be where Ohio State has struggled with Michigan. As you talk about them looking very similar to Michigan, if you were going to get them, if you were going to nip them, this might be the year when you bring back a great offensive line, a great tight end, which Michigan also had in Loveland, and then two great running backs.
So I know I said this earlier. I did not know. So before people say that I looked beforehand, I didn't know. They are only the underdog in the Ohio State game.
Okay.
They are a double-digit favorite in every game outside of Wisconsin, USC. USC, there are a 4.5-point favorite. Wisconsin, they're a 6.5-point favorite. So I think.
How much are they an underdog in the Ohio State game?
3.5 points.
Okay.
So it's a close game. I think that line's going to change dramatically as the year goes on. Obviously, if Ohio State looks really good, Penn State struggles early, the line's going to switch. It's going to shift. Vice versa. Yeah. So I'm excited to see how this team unravels or unfolds throughout the year to see if can this be a national title contender. Because I think based on the schedule, it can be. But like you said, when it comes to those big time games, can they compete against the top dogs in the Big Ten?
Yeah.
Before we leave, I want to ask you this question. Do you think so? Obviously, the goal for Penn State is to win every game. So people, when you're watching this and listening to this, don't think this is an ignorant statement. But do you think it'd be better for them if they lose the Ohio State game? Let's say they finish 11-1, right? And then Oregon beats Ohio State, right? And now Oregon is 12-0, Ohio State's 11-1, but Ohio State has a tiebreaker for Penn State. In my opinion, if I'm a Penn State fan, I'd rather not even make it to the Big Ten title game, just be 11-1 and just coast into the playoffs rather than getting a bad look in the Big Ten title game and it knock you down a bunch.
Yeah, and I think that is, and again, I understand this sounds crazy, right? But you're talking about jockeying, and just like you said, I don't think you want to go into whatever that last selection committee meeting looks like with the 12-team playoff with a bad loss as the last thing they remember, especially I think Penn State more so than maybe some other teams, again, because I think kind of the thought out there is, hey, Penn State can't beat these big teams. So do I want to put them in the playoffs where they have to play big teams? So, yeah, it sounds crazy to say that, hey, I wouldn't want to be in the Big Ten championship to take another loss. But I think if you were to lose out to a 11-1 tiebreaker, and you don't have to take that second loss, I'd be very surprised if an 11-1 team didn't find their way in the playoffs somehow.
Because I think even though if they were to go 11-1 and losing the title game, they'd still get in. But I'm just trying to think of different scenarios. Like, let's say when they were to lose to Ohio State and go 11-1, then Ohio State loses to Oregon and one other team, Michigan, we'll just say. They finish 10-2. And now you're playing an undefeated Oregon in the Big Ten title game. You lose to them. Now you have the loss to Oregon, who's going to get it over you, and you have the same record as Ohio State, and they have the head-to-head over you. So it's kind of like, now where do you fall? So the only way I would say as a Penn State fan, and again, this sounds crazy that you're like coming up with these scenarios, but the only way if I'm a Penn State fan, if I would want to go to the Big Ten title game, is if I'm undefeated. Because like if I lose, they're not going to knock a 12-1 team out. But if I'm 11-1 and I'm playing against an Oregon after losing to Ohio State, now you need to win that game. Because if you lose, you're going to be between 9 and 12 if you're lucky.
And that's why I'll also say, I think a loss to any other team is not going to be as bad for the reputation. Like if they lost to USC, my answer changes, but they were able to beat Ohio State, then
that's a big win,
Yeah, exactly.
So it's going to be interesting. Let us know in the comment section what you guys think. What kind of scenario do you see unfolding in the Big Ten? Do you think Penn State are players to win the Big Ten and get in the playoffs? Do you think this is a national championship team? As always, if you're new to the channel, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We'll see you guys next time. Peace out, everybody.
Peace.